there's a quiet voice that follows you everywhere. Not the one that offers guidance or comfort, but the one that's always keeping score. The one that notices every misstep, every flaw, every moment you fall short of some impossible standard. It lives in the space between your thoughts, in the pause before you speak, in the hesitation before you try something new. Not good enough, it whispers. Try harder, it demands. Everyone can see your flaws, it warns. And the more you listen to it, the louder it becomes, until that voice feels less like a critic and more like the truth about who you are. But here's what's strange. This voice doesn't actually make you better. It doesn't lead to growth or healing or peace. Instead, it leaves you exhausted, forever chasing a version of yourself that keeps moving just beyond your reach, forever comparing your insides to everyone else's outsides, forever feeling like you're running up a hill that gets steeper with every step you take. And what no one tells you is that this isn't just happening in your mind. It's happening in your body, in the tension that lives in your shoulders, in the tightness around your eyes, in the shallow way you've learned to breathe when you're trying to be perfect, trying to get it right, trying to avoid the slightest misstep. This isn't just mental noise. It's a physical burden you carry with you everywhere. Maybe you've lived with this critical voice for so long that you've mistaken it for motivation. Maybe you believe it's what pushes you to achieve, to improve, to become better than you were yesterday. Maybe you're afraid that without it, you'd become complacent or careless or ordinary. And so you've made peace with its presence, accepting the weight of its judgment as the cost of success or growth or acceptance. But what if that's not true? What if that voice isn't actually helping you at all? What if it's actually the very thing keeping you stuck, not in failure, but in a cycle of never feeling like you've done enough, become enough, accomplished enough to finally rest in your own skin? Because here's the reality that perfectionists rarely discuss. The pursuit of flawlessness isn't about excellence. It's about safety. It's about trying to earn what was always yours to begin with, your inherent worthiness. It's about trying to control how others see you, how you see yourself, how the story of your life unfolds. It's about trying to avoid the vulnerability that comes with being fully human, with all the messiness and uncertainty that entails. And this isn't your fault. This pattern didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere very specific, from moments when you learned that being exactly who you were wasn't enough. Maybe it was the praise you only received when you achieved. Maybe it was the criticism that came when you made mistakes. Maybe it was watching someone you loved struggle with their own harsh self-judgment. Or maybe it was simply absorbing the subtle message that permeates our culture, that worth is earned, not inherent, that you are what you do, not who you are. These messages sank deeper than conscious thought. They became the water you swim in, so constant and pervasive that you stopped noticing them altogether. And over time, that critical voice became so familiar that you mistook it for your own voice, not recognizing it as an internalized judgment that was never truly yours to begin with. The hidden cost of living this way isn't just emotional, it's physical, it's relational, it's spiritual. Because when you're always striving to be perfect, you're never actually present. You're never fully here in this moment with all its imperfect beauty. You're always reaching for the next achievement, the next improvement, the next chance to prove your worth. Always looking for evidence that you're finally good enough, or more often, evidence that confirms your deepest fear, that you never will be. This constant reaching creates a particular kind of exhaustion that rest doesn't touch, because even when your body stops moving, your mind keeps running, analyzing, planning, rehearsing, reviewing. You lie awake at night replaying conversations, imagining how they could have gone differently. You experience joy and immediately start bracing for when it will end. You achieve something meaningful, and instead of celebrating, you're already focused on the next goal, the next proof of your value. And the cruelest part? This voice promises that perfection will lead to connection, to belonging, to peace. But the reality is exactly the opposite. The more you listen to it, the more isolated you become, because perfection doesn't create bridges to others. It creates walls. It keeps people at a careful distance where they can't see your flaws or witness your struggles. It turns relationships into performances. It transforms vulnerability, the very thing that creates genuine human connection, into something to be avoided at all costs. This affects everything. It affects how you love, always trying to be the perfect partner, friend, parent, child, never showing the messy edges of your humanity. It affects how you create, always editing yourself before you've even begun, never allowing the raw, unfiltered expression that leads to true originality. It affects how you heal, always trying to do recovery perfectly, turning even your healing journey into another test you might fail. But there's a deeper wisdom available to you, one that doesn't get much attention in a world obsessed with optimization and improvement. It's the understanding that true growth doesn't come from criticizing yourself into some imagined ideal shape. It comes from creating the conditions that allow your natural healing capacity to emerge, not through force, but through presence, not through judgment, but through compassion, not through constant striving, but through genuinely allowing yourself to be as you are, right now. This isn't about lowering your standards. It's not about giving up on growth or improvement or excellence. It's about recognizing that the path to those things doesn't run through self-criticism. It runs through self-acceptance. It's the paradox that psychologists and spiritual teachers have been pointing to for centuries. You can't hate yourself into becoming someone you love. You can only love yourself into becoming more fully who you already are. Think about how you'd help a plant grow. You wouldn't stand over it yelling, "Grow faster. Your leaves aren't green enough. Why can't you be more like that other plant?" You'd give it what it actually needs: sunlight, water, good soil. You'd create the conditions that allow its natural movement toward health and growth to unfold. And the mind works in a surprisingly similar way. When you drop the weight of constant self-criticism, something unexpected happens. Your mind doesn't become lazy or complacent. Instead, it becomes spacious, creative, resilient. You start to hear the quieter voices that were always there beneath the critic: your curiosity, your compassion, your innate wisdom. You start to feel a different kind of motivation, not the frantic push of fear, but the steady pull of genuine desire, of purpose, of meaning. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small moments of noticing, of choosing differently, of gently interrupting patterns that have run on autopilot for years. It happens when you catch that critical voice in action and ask, is this really true? Is this really helpful? Is this how I would speak to someone I love? It happens when you begin to recognize that voice not as the truth about who you are, but as an old protective strategy that may have helped once, but is now causing more harm than good. And it happens most powerfully in moments of failure, those very moments when the critical voice tends to be loudest, because failure isn't evidence of your inadequacy. It's simply feedback, information, a natural part of any learning process, any creative endeavor, any meaningful human life. When you can meet those moments, not with harsh judgment, but with genuine curiosity, not with shame, but with compassion, you begin to rewrite the deepest narratives about who you are and what you deserve. There's a profound freedom in this, not the false freedom of finally achieving some perfect state, but the real freedom of no longer needing to. The freedom to be beautifully, imperfectly human. The freedom to make mistakes and learn from them without making them mean something about your worth. The freedom to create without knowing in advance how it will turn out. The freedom to love without needing to be perfect at it. So, what does this actually look like in daily life? It's not about grand gestures or dramatic changes. It's about small moments of practice, of catching yourself in old patterns and gently choosing something different. It's about noticing when that critical voice appears and meeting it not with resistance or shame, but with understanding. I see you, you might say to it. I know you're trying to protect me, but I don't need that kind of protection anymore. It's about catching yourself in the act of comparing to others, to some idealized past or future version of yourself, and gently bringing your attention back to your own path, your own timing, your own unique unfolding. It's about practicing self-compassion, not as an occasional indulgence, but as a fundamental shift in how you relate to yourself, especially in moments of struggle or perceived failure. This isn't about reciting empty affirmations or trying to force positive thinking. It's deeper than that. It's about recognizing that beneath all your striving, beneath your achievements and failures, beneath every role you play and mask you wear, there's something in you that's already whole, already worthy, already enough, not because of what you've done or what you've become, but simply because you exist. And that wholeness isn't something you need to earn. It's something you need to remember. When you begin to operate from this understanding, even for brief moments, your entire relationship with yourself begins to shift. You start to catch yourself when you fall into old patterns of harsh self-judgment and respond with compassion instead. You begin to recognize the difference between healthy striving, which comes from love, and perfectionism, which comes from fear. You start to feel what it's like to move through the world, not as a collection of flaws needing to be fixed, but as a whole person worthy of care and respect from others and from yourself. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to discover what becomes possible when you're no longer expending so much energy on self-criticism and impossible standards. Energy becomes available for creativity, for connection, for presence, for joy. You begin to feel a lightness that has nothing to do with achieving some perfect state and everything to do with no longer carrying the weight of your own judgment. This extends beyond just how you feel. It changes how you relate to others, because when you're no longer constantly judging yourself, you become less likely to judge others. When you can embrace your own imperfection, you can more easily embrace theirs. And this creates the conditions for more authentic connection, the kind that happens when we stop performing for each other and start showing up as we actually are. It changes how you approach challenges and setbacks. Instead of seeing them as evidence of your inadequacy, You begin to see them as natural parts of any meaningful journey. You become more willing to try new things, to risk failure, to step outside your comfort zone, not because you're suddenly fearless, but because your sense of worth is no longer on the line with every attempt. And it changes how you heal, because healing isn't about forcing yourself to be better. It's about creating the conditions that allow your natural capacity for wholeness to emerge. It's about meeting yourself with the same care and compassion you would offer a dear friend or a child who's struggling. It's about trusting the deeper wisdom of your system to move toward health when given the right conditions, not through force or criticism, but through presence, through acceptance, through love. This doesn't mean you'll never hear that critical voice again. You probably will. Old patterns run deep, but what changes is how you respond to it. You learn to recognize it more quickly, to question its authority, to thank it for trying to protect you, and then gently set its warnings aside. You learn to listen instead to the quieter voice beneath it, the one that knows you're already enough, already whole, already worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are. And with each small moment of choosing differently, of meeting judgment with compassion, of meeting perceived failure with curiosity instead of criticism, you begin to create a new relationship with yourself. One based not on conditional approval, but on unconditional acceptance. Not on perfect performance, but on genuine presence. Not on who you think you should be, but on who you already are. So, if something in this video resonated with you, leave a comment below with the word enough, just that one word. Let it be a reminder to yourself that you are not defined by your achievements or your failures, that your worth is not measured by your productivity or your perfection, that beneath all you're doing, your being has always been enough. And if you want more reminders of this truth, not motivational hype or quick fixes, but gentle redirections back to your own wholeness, subscribe to this channel. There's more here for you, not promises of perfection, but invitations to remember what was never actually lost, your inherent worthiness, your natural capacity for healing, your birthright of being enough exactly as you are.